on Fiqh and Nawazil, an academic course on Fiqh and Nawazil. Today's discussion is on Al-Musharaka Al-Mutanaqisa, diminishing partnership. And before we begin, we remind that Majalisu al-Dhikr is Majalisu al-Halal wal-Haram. al-Khurasani has authentically reported that he said, the gatherings of the remembrance of Allah are the gatherings that you learn therein what is halal from what is haram. And he goes on to say, al-Khurasani, كَيْفَ تَشْتَرِي وَتَبِيعُ. You learn therein how to buy and how to sell. وَتُصَلِّي وَتُصُومُ. You learn how to pray and how to fast. وَتَنْكِحْ وَتُطَلِّقْ وَأَشْبَهَ هَذَا. You learn how to get married and you learn how to divorce and the likes of that. And also Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, he said, Majalis al-Dhikr, the gatherings of the remembrance of Allah, is darsu al-Fiqhi, or darsu Fiqhi, to know the lessons of jurisprudence. And they give examples of salat. So what we're learning, it is important. This is part of the remembrance of Allah, to learn how to buy and how to sell. And this is incumbent for the one that engages into these transactions. It can be wujub, that is Aini, an individual obligation. Or else it remains as fardu kifai. That is collective obligation. If some do it, then it's no longer required from everyone else. So nonetheless, we're going to start with the topic, what are diminishing partnerships? Inshallah, if you can start from there.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Discussion number 7 from the topics of modern day Nawazil, diminishing partnership. What are diminishing partnerships? Diminishing partnership, also known as declining balance partnership or declining musharaka, is a newly introduced modern day transaction. It's widely used by Islamic banks and Islamic housing companies. How it works is one partner promises to purchase the shares of another partner's gradually until full ownership is transferred to him or her. It has been used mostly in the context of house financing. The client would want to purchase a house for which he does not have adequate funds. He approaches the financier, who agrees to participate with him in purchasing the required house. 20% of the price is paid, for example, by the client, and 80% of the price by the financier. Thus, the financier owns 80% of the house in this scenario, while the client owns 20%. After purchasing the property jointly, the client uses the house for his residential requirements and pays rent to the financier for using his share in the property.
So what we have here is diminishing partnership. And previously, in some of the classes, we spoke about the different types of partnership that a person can do in trade and business. But there is a newly introduced partnership that is called Musharaka al-Mutanaqisa, a declining type of partnership. It is from one side of the partnership, it is mutazayida. It is increase of the ownership to one side, and is on decrease on the other side. So one partner is, as he buys out the shares of his partner, he's increasing. And the other one whose shares are being bought out is decreasing. This joint ownership is called Al-Musharaka Al-Mutanaqisa. It's newly introduced from the angle that it's in the late 19th centuries, of the late 90s basically, It is brought as a transaction, as an alternative for Riba-based mortgages for the Muslims, and it was brought by Islamic institutions and financial corporations that wanted to give an alternative for the Muslims in their purchase. And it comes under Islamic finance systems. So now even we've heard that non-Muslims are even approaching these Muslim corporations to be of their clients. So it's gaining more and more popularity. And with the percentages that are down payment, some of them vary. This is just an example of what was listed here. Because Musharaka al-Mutanaqisa has overall 6 different forms. Sittatu suwarin has 6 different forms. And it's hard to restrict it in one example because there's so many different forms and different ways of going about in it. But the gist of all of it is that there's a partnership at the beginning which ends with ownership. So they say it's al-musharaka al-muntahiya bit-tamlik, which ends with ownership. So the beginning is partnership, and then it ends with being a sole owner of the property. How the process goes, it varies from one form to another, brothers. It varies from one form to another. If you can, the blinds, close the blinds. Yeah. طيب. So we see that there are so many different companies out there, housing companies that provide this type of approach. Overall, to purchase a house through these companies is through one of the 3 methods. Either they do something called Murabaha. Murabaha is cost plus purchasing. Cost plus purchasing, and which we spoke about in previous gatherings, is you go to someone, li'amir bishira, you go to someone as a bank or an institution, and you say, I want this car or this house, and they purchase it for you on your behalf. Then you pay them back in installments. That is called Murabaha. With a surplus, there's a markup of the process. That's how he gains. And then the next way is through bil ijara, with rent to own. And we spoke about that previously. The third way is this, al-musharaka al-mutanaqisa. So whenever you hear a housing company, it's not going to go beyond one of these 3, brothers. It's not going to go beyond one of these 3. Unless it goes through the conventional way, like straight up riba mortgage interests, that he's just handing it under the name halal mortgage. There's some of them that do so. They've been caught red-handed. They were just the middleman. They got a mortgage from the bank, and they stand it as a third party, and they just change the titles, and they say, we're giving this to you 0 interest. It was actually a loan of a mortgage presented to the clients, but under the name that we're a Muslim company involved as a third party for you. So they're getting the commission, but they're initially getting a mortgage that's conventional. So these are the 3 ways we mentioned, mainly. So our discussion is what is increase of more and more people are interested in diminishing partnership. It's prevalent now in America, and it's prevalent in the UK, and also prevalent in Canada and various parts of Canada. And we'll give the examples of some of the names of the companies and also the names of the companies in America and also in UK. So we're going to go now with some of the rulings. تفضل.
What are the different rulings that scholars have issued? Concerning its Islamic ruling, some contemporary jurists and modern-day fiqh councils have issued verdicts regarding it. 1. The International Islamic Fiqh Academy. They released a following resolution. The Council of the International Islamic Fiqh Academy of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, holding its 15th session in Muscat, Sultanate of Oman, on the 14th to 19th Muharram, that's 1425 Hijrah, which translates to set to 11th March 2004, having examined the research papers submitted to the Academy concerning diminishing musharaka and its Sharia criteria, having listened to the discussions on the subject, resolves: 1. Diminishing musharaka is a new form of relationship involving a partnership between two parties in an income-producing project in which one party undertakes to gradually purchase the share of the other, whether out of the purchaser's share in the project income or from any other source. 2. Diminishing musharaka is based on the contract concluded between the two parties in which each of them subscribes to a specific share of the capital of the partnership, whether in cash or another type of cash evaluated assets, after they determine the share of profit distribution, providing that each party bears his share of the loss if incurred, commensurate to the share in the capital. 3. Diminishing musharaka is characterized by the presence of a binding undertaking from only one party to buy out the share of the other party, provided the latter has the option to sell or not. The buyout is effected by concluding a series of sale contracts when buying each share. These sale contracts can be performed through exchange of offer and acceptance notifications. 4. It's permissible for any of the two parties of the musharaka to rent the share of his other partner against a specific amount and a specific period. In this case, the two parties' commitment towards the cost of essential maintenance remains as per their respective capital shares. End of quote.
So bear in mind, as it came an article on City TV titled "Muslim Canadians Left Out of Purchasing Homes Due to Lack of Halal Mortgages." And from the people, the spokesmen for the Muslims, they said there's a few alternatives. From the alternatives is al-musharaka, diminishing partnership. And they said Canadians are the second in line of the most popular faith residing in Canada after the Christians. So that leaves so many Canadians in this type of predicament regarding how to purchase a home. This is in question. How should they purchase a home? So the article is discussing the methods that Canadians have now, Muslim Canadians. How do they resort to purchasing a home? So as the committee mentions, it's a new form of relationship. That we have a joint ownership. It has the details that is characterized by the presence of a binding undertaking from only one party to buy out the share of the other party. So it doesn't really consist of, it's like a one-sided relationship in a lot of aspects, provided that the latter has the option to sell or not. Okay, so if you can see, one of the things that a lot of companies, housing companies, they make it binding that you have to sell your share. And I'll read here a question that was asked to Manzil. let's read it here. The question was posed to Manzil, and Manzil is one of the most more reliable housing company in Canada at the moment. So what happens if I don't want to buy the shares? Someone's asking Manzil. And one of our brothers posed this question. So Manzil responds by saying the whole point of the mortgage is the buying of shares to increase your ownership over the term of the contract to 100%. Why would you not buy them? And this is what they mention. And the whole purpose of this is binding onto you to purchase the shares of your partner. And this is really included, and this is the whole concept. And that's why they give you a number of years to make the payment and to buy out the shares. They give you a time frame. And I'll read you an example of Ansar, what they say. They say after 2 years, shares worth a minimum of 5,000 must be bought each year. Each share is $100. So yeah, this is a must, this is included. Okay, طيب, favor. So, before we get any further, this is the verdict of Majma Al-Fiqhi Ad-Dawli. Ad-Dawli, this international fiqh council that has made it permissible with certain guidelines, certain conditions, and some furtherly add other conditions with this. Like some of them say that it's not permissible to stipulate buying and selling in this type of partnership. Rather, the two parties may share ownership of the house, and the bank may give a separate promise to sell its share in one go, or to divide it into smaller shares and sell it. Number 2, that the bank share must be sold at the market price at the time of the sale, without committing to sell it at the same price as that for which it was purchased. If there's a loss and a drop in property prices, then both parties must bear that. So it's not permissible to promise to buy the shares at the same price as when the project began, because this is guaranteeing the partner's shares, which is not permissible. So some further add those conditions. And the meaning of that, in a nutshell, is it is common for Islamic finance companies to specify the price for which shares are sold as being predetermined, as opposed to being determined by market value at the time of sale. So everything is usually predetermined. But this is how equity works. We know equity and partnership, it doesn't work like that. And even according to some of the guidelines of these fiqh councils, so we're going to read further, inshallah. Go ahead, brother.
2. The Accounting and Audit Organization for Islamic Financial Institution, AAOIFI, they released the following resolution. Diminishing musharaka is a form of partnership in which one of the partners promises to buy the equity share of the other partner gradually until the title of the equity is completely transferred to him. It is necessary that this buying and selling should not be stipulated in the partnership contract. In other words, the buying partner is allowed to give only a promise to buy. This promise should be independent of the partnership contract. In addition, the buying and selling agreement must be independent of the partnership contract. It is not permitted that one contract be entered into as a condition for concluding the other. Number 2. The general rules for partnership must be applied to a diminishing partnership, especially the rules of Sharakat al-Aina. Therefore, it is not permitted that a contract of diminishing partnership include any clause that gives any of the parties a right to withdraw his share in the capital. 3. It is not permitted to stipulate that one partner should bear all the cost of insurance or maintenance on the ground that he will eventually own the subject matter of the partnership. 4. Each partner should contribute part of the capital. The contribution may be in the form of cash or tangible assets that can be translated into a monetary value. For example, a land for building or equipment required for the operation of partnership. The loss, if any, shall be borne periodically by the parties in accordance with the participation ratio of each partner as the equity stake of one partner decreases and the stake of the other partner increases. 5. The ratio of profit or income of the partnership that each partner, the institution and customer is entitled to should be clearly determined. However, it is permissible for the partners to agree on a ratio of profit sharing that is disproportionate to the ratio equity of ownership. It's also permissible for the partners either to maintain the ratio of profits already determined even if the ratio of equity shares has changed, or to agree on amending the ratio of profit sharing due to the change in the ratio of equity shares. In doing so, they must ensure that the principle of allocation of losses in accordance with the ratio of equity share of ownership is determined. Number 6, it is not permitted to stipulate that one partner has a right to receive a lump sum out of the profits. Number 7, it's permissible for one of the partners to give a binding promise that entitles the other partner to acquire, on the basis of a sale contract, his equity share gradually according to the market value or a price agreed at the time of acquisition. However, it is not permitted to stipulate that the equity share be acquired at the original or face value, as this would constitute a guarantee of the value of the equity shares of one partner, that's the institution, by the other partner, which is prohibited by Sharia. Number 8, the partners may arrange for the acquisition of the equity share of the institution in a manner that serves the interests of both parties. This includes, for example, a promise by the institution's client to set aside a portion of the profits or the return he may earn from the partnership for the acquisition of a percentage of the equity of the institution. The subject matter of the partnership may be divided into shares, in which case the institution's partner can purchase a particular number of these shares at certain intervals until the partner becomes the owner of the entire shares and consequently becomes the sole owner of the subject matter of the partnership. Number 9, it's permissible for either of the partners to rent or to lease the share of the other partner for a specified amount and for whatever duration, in which case each partner will remain responsible for the periodical maintenance of his share on a timely basis. End of quote.
So this financial institution of authority, Al-Hay'a al-Muhasaba, AAOIFI, they are the ones that usually certify many of the Islamic institutions, banks, if they are halal or not, yani Sharia compliant. And they're the ones that have certified some of the companies that reside here in Canada. So you can see all these conditions they give, yet it's strange how some of these companies in Canada got certified. They have a certificate on the website. But you can see that maybe, who knows, members from that company at the top part who have that authority, or is it some of them? Because some of these conditions that they laid out, they don't really meet what we see in some of these companies, which is unfortunate. طيب, let us look into the next verdict and then we will conclude, inshallah.
Number 3, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, AMJA, they stated the following, quote, companies whose contracts, in general, avoid falling into explicit interest, Riba, they do not deal with interest-based loans. Instead, they deal in types of contracts that are permissible in the Sharia in general, such as Murabaha, cost plus purchase order, Musharaka, diminishing partnership, and Ijara, rent to own. Many of people who run these companies, we notice, are anxious to avoid forbidden transactions and have exerted a great deal of effort with their legal advisors to produce legally sound contracts that will allow them to avoid what the Sharia would consider void contracts.
So bearing in mind, this type of partnership, it's not really convenient and easy here in Canada. Iqra is a financial institution for housing, Muslim housing company. When they were asked, do you guys do musharaka المتناقصة here in Canada? They say in Canada, musharaka mortgages are very difficult to offer without breaking both Canadian as well as Sharia laws. So they're honest. Most firms offering such products force customers to sign a cover agreement, followed by an interest-bearing second contract. So you just have a cover, and then you have followed another type of contract, which is interest-based. This is obviously not Sharia compliant. Some firms try to avoid tax hurdles by having the property kept under the ownership of a corporation and then split the shares of the corporation between financer and customer. This avoids capital gains and land transfer tax in a very risky way, as these taxes are imposed on fair market value and are based on beneficial ownership, which the financiers try to hide through the corporation tactic. A further problem is that the financiers, or those providing the finance, force the customers to become their maintenance agents for the property for free, like that, and avoid HST payments to the government. So there's always this runaround that they're doing, which adds further tax-related risk. Unfortunately, most customers remain unaware of the tax avoidance implemented in these products and are unaware of the significant risk they face later on due to the tax non-compliance and non-disclosures. It is for this reason the Iqraz, this company, does not offer musharaka-based mortgages in Canada. So they're honest. So a lot of these companies, they're not upfront about some of these hurdles that they go through and how they try to avoid, because some of them, I'll give you an example, like Ansar, the owner, Ansar holds the title of the house. So when you go to Ansar, the housing company that provides a lot of these people musharaka mutanaqisa, they said there's going to be under our name as the owners. And you say, what about, aren't we joint owners? So if we put both of our names, there's a lot of issues here in Canada. So we can't do that. I'm going to put my name, but you also, we're going to put you as like a trustee or something within the lines. So there's a lot of hurdles. And then with Manzil, the way they do it, let's go back to it. Where it's here mentions. Just had it here. So the way Manzil does it, I believe they put you as the owner. Huh? Your title's in your name? Okay. So they say, titles in your name. See, mashallah. So that's good. So they do it in your name. So you can see is in terms of actually being both joint owners and having that recorded, they won't. On paper, one person is the sole owner and someone else has certain wordings underneath to include as like a financer. And as a result, there may be like a mortgage approach in all of this. That's why they're saying this is very skeptical here in Canada to do. And we're going to mention another big company, the biggest housing company in America, Islamic housing company. It's called Guidance Residential. That one is the leading company out there in America, but they also do Musharaka al-Mutanaqisa. And they have also a lot of issues as well. So can you continue, inshallah, and then we'll mention.
However, their contracts do contain some forbidden components such as invalid clauses, inequity, undue risks, unknown quantities, and the like. Additionally, they need to invoke exemptions allowed by the juries and resort to an improper mixing of different schools of jurisprudence in order to devise a Sharia-based way out of the problem of interest. In order to meet the large demands of the millions of Muslims residing in America, these companies are in need of selling their contracts to the federal institutions such as Freddie Mac. These federal interest-based institutions put a number of restrictions on them that virtually prevent their contracts from being free of these Islamic violations. These violations differ in intensity from one company to another.
And Freddie Mac is a company that buys mortgages, loans, and it's loans. So it has to be a conforming loan and has certain conditions. So these Muslim housing companies, they prep the contract in a manner to suit a loan. So you can see, for them to purchase, they have to go through these ways. Follow?
The ruling of the RFC committee, specifically concerning this set of companies, is that there is an exemption to buy through them in the case of need or dire need, depending on the different intensities of violations and the fact that need must be dealt with accordingly to its severity. We encourage these companies to continue their efforts in developing their contracts in order to bring an end to their shortcomings that the committee has noted. If someone can find an alternative and not deal with these companies, he will be safe and will be protecting his faith and his honor. End of quote.
This is still on the website as a verdict and as a resolution. And they're the same people that Guidance Residential says we are certified by MJ. They say we're certified by MJ. And you can see their verdict, how it is. So it's not really clear. They're just saying, and maybe in a severe need, a person, depending on the violations, may be permitted to take on this type of contract. And like their leader of MJ said online that it is the conditions, some of the conditions that it entails. It's a condition that's invalid, but it doesn't make the rest of the whole contract invalid. So some of the clauses, they see it to be impermissible, but he says it is less of a sin to be in a state where dealing with a clause that is wrong and oppressive to you than being in a contract of a riba-based mortgage. They're saying this is less of a harm for someone who's in need. So this is what they're saying. But the question still lies, if this is proven by its clauses that this is more of a loan than a partnership, then it's riba, whether it be that way or that way. So this is that verdict. طيب, I want to have here some of the contracts of diminishing partnership. I went over some of them. Like, I'll give you an example for Ansar. Ansar, inshallah. They have a sample agreement on the website. I believe you can find it. It's called Islamic Cooperation Housing. And then they give it some clauses. But the actual agreement between a person and another, I have it. Like, the title is Members' Contribution. This is members' contribution, the amount you're putting down, and also the amount they're putting down. And then they put the cost of housing unit, the total amount of the house. And then they put the total of you occupying the house, the charges of rent. So there's predetermined. So how do they determine the rent? There's a lot of factors we're going to mention. Proportionate rent. So they're going to calculate how much is going to be the rent, depending on how much you have given of share, and also the total of the house. So let's say the whole house is 316,000. And you gave 91,000 of the money. And they gave 225,000. Okay. Then they say the charge of rent is 2,200 for renting this place. So they times the amount that you gave, 225,000, to the amount of rent, 2,200. Then they divide it by the total cost of the house. Then they say you pay monthly $1,566 a month. Then you pay an administration fee, $15. And then everything comes up together as $1,581 a month. That is how they do it. So they send you a letter saying effective, for example, November 1st, the monthly proportionate occupancy charges rent of the above housing units will be $1,581, calculated as per attached statement in accordance with the occupancy agreement signed by us. These occupancy charges are due and payable in advance on the first day of each month. In addition, you directly pay for all utilities, taxes, insurance, and other maintenance charges. Please sign and return one copy to us, and then you sign. So this is how, for example, Ansar does it. But what's different about Ansar, they add the following conditions, just so we can see. This is just, sometimes when you look at it, you sign it, you think everything is okay. At the beginner, the buyer pays the closing costs. When you go in with a contract with them, who's paying for the closing costs for getting it to the sale in the first place? The buyer. Not both of you guys, buyer. Buyer plus the company, Ansar, buys house as partners. Ansar rents out their share of the house to buyer. Rent is based on the percentage of ownership. First 2 years after purchase, there's no obligation on buyer to buy shares from Ansar. After 2 years, shares worth a minimum of $5,000 must be bought each year. Each share is $100. Value of the house at purchase is not reevaluated during this period. So even there's no revaluation. SubhanAllah. You're paying even if the price go up or down. Ansar holds the title of house. So everything's like predetermined. When the buyer becomes 100% owner of the property, then the current value of the property is evaluated. Why? Is the chances for you is greater sometimes. Like the chances of it going up are higher. For the house value to go down, it's usually not the case, but say it is. So they say if that happens, the value is more than the original value, then the buyer pays 10% of profit to Ansar. Okay. So this is what happened to one brother. He paid it off. He became the full owner. And they said, we're going to reevaluate the house. Oh, you owe us 10%. So the brother had to pay, I think, like a few other thousands, he said. And he was very disturbed because he had to pay. He wasn't expecting this. So there's some ambiguity. B, if the value is less than original value, then Ansar pays 10% of loss to buyer. Ansar agent mentioned that this clause is because buyer and Ansar must share in profit or loss. So this is how they share in profit or loss, only from this angle. Once you become the full owner, revaluation. Throughout the whole process, it's not really share and loss. Because a lot of them, they put clear statement that if any damages, it's on your shoulder. Anything happens, it's on your expenses. You have to go contact your insurance company. This happened, that happened. Everything of that sort is on your shoulder. And some of them, like Guidance Residential in America, they say except natural disasters. Why do they say that one? That one is, of course, the insurance is going to cover it. Or they put exceptions for certain things that if something were to happen, the government will get involved and they would recompense. So they put things that were in their favor. So they said they're not really sharing in losses. Why you only put these ones and you left the other ones that are possible? And then even the ones in UK, they'll tell you up front that in losses, we're going to have this percentage. You're always going to have a higher percentage of losses than us. Like this, yes, it should be determined based upon the ratio of their ownership. They own more, of course, but even at the end of the contract, it's still up in the air. It's very confusing. Another thing to pay attention, that a lot of these fiqh councils, they see it problematic to have all these contracts in one. Some of them, they give you actually like 8 pages and say, here, Bismillah, sign. 8 pages, like you have a joint agreement, you have a payback, you have like a mortgage agreement, you have like a rent agreement. So you have all these agreements in one. So some of the scholars, they see this to be problematic. They say each one needs a separate agreement. And it can't be joined all in one. Some of them are on that opinion. Another thing that is something that makes it very skeptical is some of them, the way how they determine the rent rate of it increasing is when the federal government increases the interest rates. So when the Fed rate was 1.5%, for example, in 2020, Guidance Residential's rate was around 2%. And when the federal rate is high, the rate will follow that federal government of the guidance and will go higher. So you can see this is something strange. Another thing that they mention is the risk sharing part. When they say we're going to share in risk factors, when you have the right to sell the property, if you sell in a down market at a loss, they will not share the loss. They will recover up to the whole sale price to recover the remaining debt. Same thing in the case of foreclosure. So there's a lot of clause that is in their favor in these type of things. Also, someone who did a transaction with Guidance Residential, he said they don't practice what they preach of joint ownership. They say it's jointly owned, but that's not the case. If something wrong was to break in the house, they don't fix it. You're the one bearing the entire costs, not to mention sharing costs of taxes, insurances, and so on. The profit portion, the excess, is calculated based on the exact same compound interest of other banks use. So the way they determine their profit, they use, and even some of them will tell you, we use a mortgage calculator with the way we do it. And their interest rates are usually higher than Riba-based banks. So they're usually higher in the surplus and the markup. But some object to defend. They said, the reason why you're paying for property taxes, because property taxes are services rendered to tenants. And these property taxes pay for schools, roads, and etc. Hence, it is the responsibility of the people living in the house, like electricity and other utilities. And here, the services that you're paying for is for you living there. And property taxes and these things is for your own benefit. But you ask them, what about insurance? And insurance, this is for the owner. This is for the owner of the property. طيب, another thing that they say, there's one other important thing, is that the one renting has to pay for all repair and maintenance costs. Yes, some of them differ, like renovations. I think Menzil says they will be a partner with you in renovation. Well, if you're a partner, they should share the cost too, so like in repair and maintenance. Also, you're required to have insurance, so they add these 2 points as well. And one of the things too, that if you default on a payment, you will not receive any money back. They'll take the home and sell it to recover the amount of your debts which is outstanding. This is what they mention. And a lot of the people now, they resort to this because they say the American dream is to own a house. And this is one of the part of the dreams of America, is to own a house. So people feel like they have no other way and this is the resort. So some people resort to this. And yes, a lot of the fiqh councils are trying to give an alternative for riba mortgages by trying to find a way, even through these schemes, by giving it different titles. Like here, with Menzil, they're a bit different than Ansar. Ansar is a ijara, rental agreement. Menzil say there's no rental agreement. Instead, they offer the partner to live in the property for free. In return, and expect to take care of maintenance and taxes and utilities. So we'll let you live in for free, but just take care of the maintenance, the taxes, and utilities. This is what they mention. You can say free, but you have to do this. It's what's expected. They say it's expected. طيب, one of the benefits of Menzil, they say if payment is missed, it is scheduled for another date. There's no late fees. Also, there's no early penalty. Like if you were to pay before the fixed term and pay it off more than what is agreed, there's no like 3 months early penalty that you would find in a mortgage if you go pay before the fixed term. So they say we don't. And some of the companies, of the housing companies, they have a fixed term that if you pay prior to the term, there's a penalty. So they're saying there's no penalty. A recourse penalty, basically. And also they say the mortgage amount is fixed for 5 years. And after 5 years, the mortgage is adjusted based on rates coming from the Government of Canada, bond rate. Rate is used to predict rates of return profit to potential investors. Also, they take 2% of financing amount as administration fees. يعني منزل. And I'm going to read you some questions one of our brothers asked him. A questioner asked, is it possible to sell just my shares to another buyer? I want to share, I own this. It's shirakat al-milk, I own this. Partnership based upon joint ownership. I own this, can I sell it to another buyer? They say, no, this will not be possible. You would have to sell the property. I say, why can I sell my share that I own to someone else? They say, no, you can't. That's questionable. That's questionable, brothers. طيب. And someone asked them, every quarter you receive a sale offer stating the number of shares and the price for the next quarter, which includes a profit. Does the price of shares change every quarter? So they say sale price is fixed for each 5-year term. Like mortgages are like that too. They're fixed there. So this is the same thing. طيب. So he says, would that also change the monthly payment or the total musharaka amount? Payments are fixed for each 5-year term. So your value in the market, your share, all of this, it's fixed. Like suppose the value of the house went down or the rent went down. Why are you still paying the same amount? It's still fixed for 5 years. That's what they say. They say, yes, the payments may change every 5 years based on the rate at the time of renewal. Then he says, the questioner says to him, to Manzil, what happens if I don't want to buy the shares? So they say the whole point of the mortgage is buying of shares to increase your ownership over the term of the contract to 100%. Why would you not buy them? Can you really understand that this is not really a partnership, brothers? This is financing in a real nutshell. It's like you come in, you are in debt to your partner. You find yourself conditioned to certain terms. That you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. So this is where partnership is questioned in a lot of aspects. Another question that was asked, what does profit mean? Is it any additional amount on top of the original buying price? So if it was bought for 600K and sold for 700K, would Manzil forego 80K? So they're going on the percentage. So they say in a musharaka, the financier is entitled to share in the capital gains of the property to their ownership position at the time of sale. We do not share in that. And so there's a lot of question marks. But overall, they are the best. They say they have a certificate on their website from Dar al-Iftah in Montreal, someone certifying them. And then they say they have AAOIF certifying them. So, yes, if a person were to take these verdicts generally and go with some of these fatwa, and they deem them to be reliable, no harm. No harm. I asked personally Sheikh Sa'id al-Shitri about some of their ways, how they conduct. And I'll read here where he mentions that it's permissible So I asked him, and he said it's permissible. And then also I asked Sheikh Salim Hilali. He said in an audio voice note that he replied back with that it's not permissible. He said even if the fiqh councils permitted it with conditions, because he says I see it to be dirham bi dirham baynahuma harira, like the statement of Ibn Abbas. It's money for money, but silk in between as a disguise. It's really money for money. It's really, we're all profiting in this investment through a loan that we're giving. Nothing has to do with the house. No one's really investing in the house. It's not a partnership of business to invest in the house. This miskin just wants a house to live in, and we're just trying to benefit money, not by the house going up and down, and investing in that, but more so about getting this person to pay me more back on the loan that I'm giving him. So this is what he sees, Sheikh Salim Hilali. So I'm going to conclude, inshallah, because we have to take the next class, is this matter is very doubtful, I would say. To conclude that Musharaka al-Mutanaqisa is extremely doubtful, because a lot of the times it doesn't meet the conditions. And some of them, and they don't even give you a statement of updates on how much your share value is. It should give you an update of how much is the value of your share in the market. What if the person says volunteering, I'm going to pay the TMI, everything, the insurance, this. No harm if the person renting. But some scholars made an exception. We mentioned that timely, according to the use of the rent, that if he takes it upon himself, this is exempted. If they agree on that. And so as we mentioned, some of them, they put it a condition that the purchase agreement should not be included. It should just be wa'adun mulzim, like a binding promise that is separate from the partnership agreement. So like you have that, so some of them say that. And nonetheless, a lot of the verdicts of the scholars in this topic is conflicting, very conflicting. So it's a doubtful matter. And I really think that the people, if they can find other alternatives that we mentioned, but manzil out of all of them, in comparison to housing, to some of these companies called halal mortgages, or guidance residential, or ansar, the best of them is looks like manzil. And manzil, there's a lot of question marks still. There's a lot of question marks. But as we mentioned, if someone were to take these verdicts of these scholars that permitted it, then la dayr, there's no harm. And whoever were to refrain and see it safer, because let me read here. Just a few things on manzil, inshallah, so the brothers can understand further if it's time. So they say, you, the client, hold the title of the property and securities provided to the fund by way of a lien over the property. We feel it's important for you to have the title. It also makes things easier for everyone administratively. You know, the government-wise. As we said, brothers, there's a lot of risk factors in that. And then they say, in Musharaka, we use the 5-year Government of Canada bond rate as a benchmark to determine the expected profit rate of return, allowing us to also meet the investor's return on investment expectations and keep them vested in the fund. Please note that this is not interest, as we are not lending money, but rather financing the transaction in a partnership model and using the posted rates as a means to transparently determine the share price. The rates are based on the 5-year Government of Canada rates. So this rate can be found here. So this is what we mentioned early on. What was the thing we said? That Iqra has already exposed them. What did they say? They say in Canada, Musharaka mortgages are very difficult to offer without breaking both Canadian as well as Sharia laws. Most firms offering such products force customers to sign a cover agreement followed by an interest-bearing second contract. Which is the second? Based upon that rate. So there's a rate, and they're really following the interest rate. So people are saying that this is a fake musharaka. It's a real financing that is based upon an interest rate of the government. And that's how it fluctuates. By the interest rate, fluctuate, not more so by this value of the house. So this is where it's doubtful. So we end with this, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us of what we heard and to make us of those who hear speech and follow the best of it. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. And inshallah, shortly after, we will start our next class. بارك الله فيكم.